Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Jai Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Jai Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Janna Girivardhari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jai Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jai Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Jai Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Chari Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda, Radhe, Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda, Jaya Sitaram, Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sitaram, Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sitaram, Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sitaram, Lakshman Hanu, Jaya Gaurangitai, 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 Jaya Gaurangitai, Jaya Gaurangitai, 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 Jaya Gaurang, Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Premanande, Hari Hari Go. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paradhamsa Prabhu Jacharya Astolta Sishimad Abai Chavanim and Bhaktadanta Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Brahmsa Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Deta Radha Siva Sri Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopal Gopanav Shama Kund Radha Kund Givi Govardhana Ki Jai Mai Povandavandam Ki Jai Bhaktavan Zamanadam Ki Jai Shri Radha Goklananda Ki Jai Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Ki Jai Shri Govintai Ki Jai. All glories to somebody devotees. All glories to somebody devotees. All glories to somebody devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. So this morning we are reading from the Caitanya-Caritāmṛta Madhya chapter 10, and we're going to go through from 10 verse 56 up to the verse which appears majestically on the board there, up to 65. So we'll go for that, and we'll do the recitation of the verse after we've done the previous ones. Yeah. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Chaitanya Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Chaitanya Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Chaitanya Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, so I'll do the reading from the classical Bengali, well, the best I can do at least, and then the English, verse by verse, between 56 and 64 of this chapter. Just for some context, so Senior Father Bhavananda Roy is talking here to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tour of South India, and now he's thinking, okay, now let's return to Jagannath Puri to continue his mission there. But he's just rounding a few things off, and he's discussing things and, talking to the devotees and so forth. So Bhavananda Roy, there's two children that we know of, which is Ramananda Roy. So don't get the two mixed up. I did when I first read it. And of course, Vaninath, who is mentioned in this verse here. Okay, let's go. Hey Vaninath Barahibe Tumara Charane Yabe Agyataha Karibe Savane. This son, Vaninath, will remain at your lotus feet to always immediately attend to your orders and serve you. Amiya Gyani More Sankochana Karibe Ye Abhichatabe Ye Gyana Dibe. My dear Lord, please consider me your relative. Do not hesitate to order whatever you desire at any time you desire it. Prabhu kahe ki sankocha tumi nahapa jame jame tumi amma samsavasam jame jame tumi amara sa samse kinkar. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted Bhavananda Roy's offer, saying, I accept without hesitation because you are not an outsider. Birth after birth, you have been my servant, along with your family members. Dina pancha satta pitare ashibe ramananda tanra sange punahabe amara ananda. Sri Ramananda Roy is coming within 5 to 7 days. As soon as he arrives, my desires will be fulfilled. I take great pleasure in his company. Eta Bali Prabhu Tanre Koila Aligan Tanra Putra Sabasire Daviva Charana. Saying this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced Bhavananda Roy. The Lord then touched the heads of his sons with his lotus feet. Tabe Mahaprabhu Tanre Gare Pataila Vaninatha Patanayakye Nikate Vakila. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then sent Bhavananda Roy back to his home, and he kept only Vaninath Patanayakya in his personal service. Vachachara sabe loke vidai karela tabe prabhu koila Krishna dase boilaila. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then asked all the people to leave. Afterward, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called for Kala Krishnadas, who had accompanied the Lord during his South Indian tour. Prabhu kahe Bhattacharya shunaya inhara charita dakshina giyakila iha amara sahita. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, My dear Bhattacharya, just consider the character of this man who went with me to South India. Bhattatari ache gela amare chadia Bhattatari che inhare anulun udaria. He left my company to associate with the Bhattataris, but I rescued him from their company and brought him here. So that's the context there. So it's basically, this is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here talking, of course, about one of his disciples who had basically lost his way, Kala Krishnadas. So now that moves us now onto the 10.65. So we will do the verse now. Hebiyami ihanani kavilian vidai. I'll do both, sorry. Yaha nicha yaha amasane nahi adadai. Yahani kavilian vidai. Yaha nicha yaha namasane nahi adadai. Hebiyami ihanani kavilian vidai. Ihan nicha yaha amarasani nahi adadai. Hebiyami ihanani kavilian vidai. Yahan nicha yaha amasana nahi adadai. Would anyone like to go? Prabhuji, Sham? Oh. Hebiyami hanami kavilian vidai. Yaha nicha yaha amasani nahi adadai.
Hebiyami hani karilana vidaya. Yaha icha yaha amasani nahi adadaya.
Hebiyami hanani kavilian vidai. Yaha nicha yaha vidai.
Hebiyami hani karilana vidaya. Yaha icha yaha amasani nahi adadaya.
Yama dihanani kaliyan vidai. Yaha nicha yaha amasani nahi adadai. 8 ladies, please. Anyone? Yamami ihanani kaliyan vidai. Ihanicha yaha amasani nahi adadai. Yamani vichani ihani vidai. Ayanicha yaha amisani nahi adadai. Are you Bengali, Perchan? Okay, then listen to the rest of us struggle for that. Usually, the accent over the A, if you say day, and then the A becomes a bit more silent because of the emphasis on the previous A. Viday. Anyway. Okay, so what we do is, let's go into Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu's English. Now that I have brought him here, I'm asking him to leave. Now he can go wherever he likes, for I am no longer responsible for him. So that's Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu talking about Kala Krishna Das. In fact, let's repeat that English actually. Now that I have brought him here, I'm asking him to leave. Now he can go wherever he likes. For I'm no longer responsible for him. So purport by Srila Prabhupada. Kala Krishna Das was influenced and allured by nomads or gypsies who enticed him with women. Maya is so strong that Kala Krishna Das left Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's company to join gypsy women. Even though a person may associate with Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he can be allured by Maya and leave the Lord's company due to his slight independence. Only one who is overwhelmed by Maya can be so unfortunate as to leave Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's company. Yet unless one is very conscientious, the influence of Maya can drag one away, even though he be the personal servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and what to speak of others. The Bhattacharys used to increase their numbers by using women to allure outsiders. This is factual evidence showing that it is possible at any time to fall down from Lord's association. One need only misuse his little independence. Once fallen and separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead's association, one becomes a candidate for suffering in the material world. Although rejected by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Kala Krishnadas was given another chance, as those following verses relate. So the verse again. Now that I brought him here, I'm asking him to leave. Now he can go wherever he likes, for I'm no longer responsible for him. Om Jnanam Tiriram Dasya Janangara Shalakaya Chakshu Om Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Garamayam Dadati Svapadantikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripo Simbodevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Prachadine Devasesha Shunyavadi Prashachade Satarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, once again, a bit of the context. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at this point has just done this South Indian tour, and there's been a few incidents, not least, I think, with Kala Krishna Das, but of course, that's what this verse is about. Most, of course, was fine. And it was extensive tour of South India, and then Mahaprabhu focused his energies on cementing the Sankirtan movement in Jagannath Puri, of course, very important strategic place. Maharaj Prataparuja, who of course was the king of Orissa at the time, and who incidentally, Orissa was not invaded by foreign rule so much, so therefore he remained kind of in control, very much in control of Orissa. That's something that is historically significant, I think. And he was also a very pious king. And he arranged for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Kashi Mishra's house, where this is where, of course, the community of devotees were coming to see him. And Bhattacharya, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in particular, who was very dear, understandably, to Lord Chaitanya at this point, was bringing people to see him, to take his audience. So specifically to the verse, the father of Ramananda Roy, Bhavananda Roy, offered another son named Valinath Patanakya for the Lord's service. He actually needed a new personal servant because he rejected Kala Krishnadas. So he had many servants, but these were prominent. Mahaprabhu informed his associates about the pollution of Krishnadas, brought about by his association with the Bhattacharys, and thus the Lord proposed to give him leave. Of course, you can imagine, actually, Kala Krishnadas, when he heard this news, after his mistake, if you like, after he heard this news, he was absolutely devastated. He was a nice, young, innocent, perhaps in some ways, Brahmin, and wasn't particularly senior or experienced, and in some ways, perhaps even allured by his naivety. And he cried and he cried and he cried. But as we do learn, he did get the mercy of Lord Nityananda and the other devotees, who in some ways, the devotees are more merciful than the Lord himself. But let's think about some context here. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was on this extensive tour of not just South India, but the whole of India, really. And we're talking about 15th century India, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dressed in the saffron robes of a sannyasi. Even though he was a lord himself, and he was quite relatively young for a sannyasi, actually. He cut off the beautiful hair, and basically roamed the paddy fields, of course, and roamed India and danced around India, of course, as a sannyasi. And in those days, even your personal servants would have to have a certain standard, because it would have been open to criticism and envy from other Brahminical orders. And therefore, the reputation, if you like, of his Sankirtan movement was to be considered, was to be at stake. So, for example, the fact that Kala Krishna Das had been allured by Bhattataris, who are men, who are actually into black magic. They were. I mean, you still find this even in Kerala and other parts of India today. There are people in many parts of Africa and all kinds of places, actually, India, kind of priests, or so-called priests, but priests, those who are fulfilling the priestly role, will be practicing and offering black magic, or the evil eye. You may have heard of these things, where people would go to them and give them some donation, and they would say, okay, you want to punish your uncle, this is what you have to do, and so on and so forth. So it's not exactly auspicious, it's like a Tamasic Brahminical kind of culture. But nevertheless, they were of the priestly class. And as we read here, to gain their numbers, they would entice people with perhaps a very strong weapon. And there's beautiful women in this case, I think it seems, which of course, so Kala Krishna Das was a victim to that. The Bhattataris, I think, translates as expert. I think there's one translation could be expert, or in this context, expert in manipulation or the black arts. In other words, these priests, these Bhattataris, they knew the material energy, they understood the material energy, they understood even negative things that they may be focusing on, like revenge or these negative energies. They knew about it and were expert, but they were not offering bhakti, it seems, at all. In fact, they were trying to find weak points in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's kind of entourage, if you like. In fact, someone quite close. Now, Kala Krishna Das was not on the same level as, say, any member of the Panchatattva or Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He was a jiva, he was, a conditioned soul like you or I. But at the same time, for that reason, if none other, it's actually a very important pastime. Why? Because we are, we have ourselves left the Lord Association and have got into Maya, and also we are no stronger than Kala Krishna Das. We are all potentially the same, very much so, in fact. Of course, the story goes, of course, that so it was one morning when Kala Krishna Das, maybe he should have been in a personal association serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in some way, but he wasn't there. He'd gone off somewhere, I don't know the details to be honest, but he went off, met the Bhattataris, and they said, we'll introduce you to some women. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he realized Kala Krishna Das had gone off, he realized here's a problem, because this is not just about, their intention was to make them one of them, basically, or to bring him down, ultimately, in the ways we can understand. But so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself came in person and grabbed him from the association by his hair, his sikha or his hair, from his seated position, to take them away from the Bhattataris and the nomadic women. But of course, initially, they were upset. In fact, they even got weapons to try to attack Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Imagine that. Imagine how low that was. He was a sannyasi on his Sankirtan mission. He had to go into their association, and of course he wasn't risking his life because he's the Supreme Lord. And as soon as they got their whatever weapons they had, swords, spears, and knives, and so forth, in fact, what happened was they couldn't lift them against Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they ended up hurting and cutting themselves. So that's what happens when you take on the Lord. It doesn't go too well for the attacker. And in that atmosphere, in that context, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was able to rescue Kala Krishnadas. So, but at the same time, like I said, this was not an easy thing. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came himself. He didn't even send anyone else on his behalf because he realized that the power, if you like, of Maya, and we can understand that ultimately it is only the mercy of the Supreme Lord that can actually get us out of this material energy. We have to have that kind of relationship with him, and ultimately we cannot do it by ourselves. This is the lesson I think is there. Now, that said, so we understand what Mahaprabhu had to go through to get his personal servant back, but we also understand why Mahaprabhu had to let him go. He'd been tainted, and reputations and the Sankirtan movement were at stake, and Mahaprabhu wanted to have personal. He wanted those that I suppose were more deserving at the time. But feeling compassion for the devastated Krishnadas, the devotees proposed he perform a special service. In other words, even though sometimes leaders have to make difficult decisions, devotees are merciful. And no matter what people do, whatever mistakes they make, devotees, and even Prabhupada actually had this mood as well. Devotees may make mistakes, but they should never be taken out of devotional service. Maybe they have a different service accordingly, but never take people completely away from Krishna. There's always some service to perform. So they gave a special, Nityananda and others gave Kala Krishnadas a special service, which was to travel to Navadvip and inform the community that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had arrived in Puri. In this way, Krishnadas would remain in the association of devotees. In other words, if someone has been weak or has exposed some area of lacking, let's say, has missed the mark, but they should, the association of devotees is the cure for us actually, and also for Krishnadas too. Nityananda Prabhu personally sent Krishnadas to Bengal to inform the Navadvip devotees about the Lord's return to Jagannath Puri, and he did that with great enthusiasm. All the devotees in Navadvip thus began arranging to come to Jagannath Puri. So you imagine, Jagannath, the distance between Navadvip and Jagannath Puri, I don't know. I mean, nowadays there's a train you can get. I mean, you have to stop off at Kolkata and then carry on. But in those days, that was quite a journey, a few hundred miles, I would say. Yeah. So they needed time to prepare, pack their things, and so forth. Mahaprabhu is coming from South India and is now coming to Jagannath Puri. So let all the devotees gather there for this transcendental Leela. And thankfully, Kala Krishnadas, although was no longer allowed to be Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's personal servant, was still very much part of the Sankirtan association. So that's the good news, of course, Of course, I think this is an important Leela, an important pastime, although sometimes not, sometimes a little bit difficult to digest because we feel a bit sorry, don't we, for Kala Krishnadas. But nevertheless, it's a very important pastime because we are all susceptible to this. I mean, you imagine that he had Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's personal association and decided one morning just to go off. I mean, but it gives you an idea of the power of lust, and lust is among the most powerful weapons of the material energy. Because when you think about it, it is how the material energy is. That's why the material energy is populated by living beings. It's due to sexual attraction, reproduction, and so forth. The whole material world is more or less based on this principle. Not obviously the demigods, also the animals, and obviously human beings. So it's the fundamental scaffolding of the material world. And but of course, there's nothing wrong with married life and so forth. But the point here is that Kala Krishnadas had left the association of the Supreme Lord and to be with these nomadic women for frivolous purposes, it seems. But what is lust? Lust can be defined not just in terms of a sexual overt sexual attraction or whatever, but lust can be defined as the craving for something material for our use and not for that of Krishna's. The craving for something which is ultimately not for Krishna. That can be the wider definition of lust. Lust can be used for lust for wealth, lust for possessions, lust for things. Shri Siddhartha Gokulananda ki jai, Sita Ram Lakshmana Hanuman ki jai, Sita Gauri Thai ki jai. So therefore, it is very much the opposite of love of Krishna, because what you're trying to do, you're ultimately trying to love yourself. It is, in other words, lust can be feelings and expressions of selfishness, ultimately. It's not for Krishna, it's for me. That can be the definition of lust, whatever form it takes. In Bhagavad Gita 3:37, we read in the verse, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring, sinful enemy of this world." Prabhupada said, when the living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust, in association with the mode of passion. In other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. They're two very different things, although they may appear to have the similar origin. When lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity. Which is, I guess, in terms of what happened with Kala Krishnadas, it is understood, and we've heard many times, I think, that men are like butter and attractive women are like fire. So you put the two together, and what happens to the butter? When it's heated up, it melts. It's automatic. And therefore, especially if someone is in a renounced order of life, one needs protection, which we'll read about in a moment. When it comes to this thing, it is such a powerful energy, sexual attraction, for example, that it cannot be underestimated, because we are weak and the material energy is strong, but Krishna is stronger. And what's interesting is also, I think, if we look, for example, at the biblical story of Adam and Eve, what is quite interesting, actually. The genders are not quite the same in terms of their relationship with lust, because it took a snake. I think it was the devil in the story. It took the devil in the form of a serpent to persuade Eve, the lady, to eat from the tree of material knowledge, if you like, eat from the fruit, the forbidden fruit. But the snake didn't need to directly tempt Adam. It just simply took the woman to tempt Adam, which is interesting. Because the story, those who are not familiar, the story goes that the snake tempted Eve to take from the fruit of forbidden knowledge. And then Eve just said to Adam, "Take a bite." And he took a bite straight up. In other words, because of his lust for her, actually, or his attraction to her physical form especially, was overpowering for him and drove both Adam and Eve, of course, away from the dharmic path in this story. So, particularly, I think, with the woman's physical form can be very bewildering for a man. And but let's move on. Bhagavatam 9:19-17. One should not allow oneself to sit on the same seat, even with one's own mother, sister, or daughter, for the senses are so strong that even though one is very advanced in knowledge, he may be attracted by sex. This is the quite a strong verse here. Prabhupada said, learning the etiquette of how to deal with women does not free one from sexual attraction, as specifically mentioned herewith. Such attraction is possible even with one's mother, sister, or daughter. This is coming directly from the words of Prabhupada here. Even if one is highly advanced, materially or spiritually, he may be attracted by lusty desires. The object of attraction may even be one's mother, sister, or daughter. Therefore, one should be extremely careful in dealing with women in this way. So this gives you an idea here. Just a few more examples, if I may. Bhagavatam 7.15-36, Prabhupada's purport. Of course, in this case, the context is, of course, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a sannyasi in this particular lila. Prabhupada actually writes that one must ultimately accept sannyas, the renounced order, for only by the renounced order can one be situated in Brahma Sukha, or transcendental bliss. In that one is no longer attracted by lusty desires. Indeed, when one is no longer disturbed, especially by lusty desires for this indulgence, he is fit to become a sannyasi. Otherwise, he should not accept the sannyas order. If one accepts sannyas at a mature stage, there is every possibility of his being attracted by women and lusty desires, and thus again becomes a so-called victim. So, of course, I think here we have to say that when one talks, it is not necessary for everybody to formally take sannyas. One can be a grihasta, but have that kind of sense of mentality where one is completely another definition of sannyas, as apart from, let's say, of highest varna, is to be completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. In other words, you can be a grihasta, not a grihamaidi, i.e. grihamaidi being a non-devotee or non-committed devotee couple. But grihasta is, grihastas where the couple are engaged in devotional service. This is a form of sannyas for the man, especially after a certain age, when the children have left home and so forth. One can be absorbed in vanaprast, at least. And that's a good thing, where one is completely, let's say, beginning to renounce the world as a couple even. And is starting to focus on the holy places and living more simply. So this is also very good, of course. So there you go. So, of course, a few examples I thought just before I kind of. I've got a few more examples here, but maybe we won't have time for all of that. Anyway, I'll go on. A good example is Ajamil, the life of Ajamil. I think is a good example from the scriptures on this subject. He was actually a very Pakka Brahmin, but he ended up being allured by a lusty lady who he ended up leaving his original wife, having lots of children with this other woman, who was he even did all kinds of things to please her. Ajamil was given a very good background, all the right education, and yet this allurement of this beautiful woman, he ended up marrying her, left his original wife, and performed all kinds of sins in order to please her desires for, jewelry, home, shoes, saris, etc., whatever it was, makeup. And he was basically her servant. And he was committing all kinds of crimes and all kinds of burglary and all kinds of things. And yet, of course, they had a son called Narayan, which came to his favour. But so in the end, the Yamadutas didn't get him at the time of death, and he learned his lesson. Narayan, Narayan. So that was one good thing. So here there's a story about the power of Maya and how it can drag down even the greatest or great brahmanas. But at the same time, it also shows the Lord's mercy when you call upon his name. And for devotees, of course, one of the weapons, the greatest weapon against Maya and its weapon, lust, of course, is the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So although we must not underestimate the power of Maya and the power of lust, we should also understand the power of the holy names of the Lord, as described, of course, and propagated by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and his mission. So we're dealing with two very strong energies here, but we cannot escape from such material attraction without the mercy of the Lord and without the potency of the holy name. If we think we can, then we're kidding ourselves. We've become that big block of butter. Even Lord Indra being a post, of course, in the heavenly world. Whoever is Lord Indra at the time, it's been like a prime minister or king. There's different jivas that are Indras. I think it changes when the Manus change, the Indra changes. And but most of the Indras, they appear to be quite lusty. They don't. Most of them actually. There's one, Lord Indra, who was sent down to take birth as a pig because of what he did, an act of lust and so forth. And initially, he didn't. Obviously, as you imagine, being the king of heaven, he didn't. Taking birth as a pig on the earth probably wasn't his first choice. He probably was very, very upset by this. And yet, after being a pig, then he had a pig wife, and he had piglets and pig family. And when it came to say, okay, you're done now, it's time for you to return to your... Exactly. Confirm. It's time for you to return to your heavenly abode. That was deliberate, wasn't it, Prabhu? It's time for you to return to your heavenly abode. How did Indra, in the form of a pig, respond? No, I'm happy as I am. No, I've got my little corner, I've got my little dirt patch. He became attached. And that's Lord Indra. And Lord Indra, being king of heaven, extremely powerful, yet he was prepared to give that up to live in mud. And we're all like that, of course. We're all like this. This is why these accounts find themselves in the scriptures, because they are lessons for us. We are like that, actually. Let's do a couple more examples. I think we'll finish in about 5 minutes. Is that the usual for Saturday? 9 o'clock? Okay, let's say, another 15 minutes. So, Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 2, 6, purport. The context is about apsaras and how they're beautiful celestial women, damsels, who are able to pull down yogis and munis and so forth. And they are able to use the full force of Cupid, as it were, against the innocent man, it seems. Well, whatever. So Prabhupada writes here in the purport, the Creator has constructed women in such a way that their beautiful voices and movements and their beautiful features and other parts of their bodies attract the members of the opposite sex, both on the earth and on other planets. When one is controlled by Cupid, or the beauty of women as Prabhupada defines, he becomes stunned like matter, such as stone. Captivated by the material movements of women, he wants to remain in this material world. Thus one's promotion to the spiritual world is checked simply by seeing the beautiful body structure and movements of women. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has therefore warned all devotees to beware of the attraction of beautiful women and materialistic civilization. So, of course, we're talking about materialistic women here in particular, and the materialistic civilization. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu even refused to see Patapuruja Maharaj because he was a very opulent person in the material world. Now remember, as we mentioned earlier, Patapuruja was the king of Orissa, and he was effectively sponsoring Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, accommodating Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's stay in Orissa. And yet, Mahaprabhu himself, there's a whole Leela, as some of you will know, where Mahaprabhu initially didn't want to even meet Patapuruja. It wasn't until he came in disguise as a Brahmin later on in the Gandicha Mandir, where he was reciting the pastimes of Krishna and the gopis. Then Mahaprabhu... But of course it was all Leela because Mahaprabhu knew. He's God. He knew it was Maharaj Patapuruja. But he was setting an example, just like he set an example by asking Kala Krishna Das to leave his company. He was setting an example, saying, I am a sannyasi, what business do I have with a king? What business do I have with a king? Because you imagine, had Mahaprabhu, he had to send the right message to the devotees. He had to send the message that simple living, high thinking is highly conducive to, austerity also, is highly conducive to spiritual life and bhakti. Yes, Patapuruja, perhaps ironically, was actually a great devotee in many ways. But because he was a king, Mahaprabhu was saying, look, it's a message ultimately to the world and to other members of the Sankirtan movement. You don't have to aspire. Okay, he has a palace, he has jewelry, he has wonderful turban and whatever Pratapuja had as a king. But don't follow that. That's not what it's all about. In fact, if anything, it's a disqualification. What does it say? That it's also from the Bible as well, similar. The chances of a rich person going to heaven is the same as getting a camel for the eye of a needle, or an elephant for the eye of a needle, which is the Indian version. In other words, it's obviously it gives you an idea. It's not impossible, especially in terms of Pratapuja, but it's very, very difficult, because lust not only takes the form I've been describing, but can take the form of attachment to comfort as well, of the palace and so forth. If someone is offered, imagine a devotee who is a simple devotee who is quite poor materially, then suddenly he wins the lottery and he wins £10 million, for example, or £100 million. I mean, it's going to be so difficult for him to continue with his devotional service in the same way. Not impossible, but it's a form of lust. You're going to very quickly forget Krishna. We may say, oh, if I win the lottery, not that you should enter the lottery, that's another matter, but let's say somehow you win the lottery and you've got 10 million now. And we may say, oh, I'll give it all to the temple, or I will give it to the needy. You want to put that to test? Would you really? Would you really? Do not put the Lord to test. Then Maya and lust comes in. Oh, actually, no, maybe I should have a palace after all, It can all be used in Krishna's. But of course, another thing as well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is appealing to the Brahminical audience here. Those that are already bound, if you like, not bound, but are, their code is simple living, high thinking. And Mahaprabhu is telling us actually that there's no need to complicate your life, because if you've got Krishna, you've got more than a palace. There's many, many palaces in the spiritual world. You don't need any in the material world to distract you from reality. It's a distraction. And this is what I believe to be the message here. But let's continue here. So Mahaprabhu said, those who are engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, those who are engaged in devotional service of the Lord because they are very serious about going back home, back to Godhead, should be very careful to avoid seeing the beautiful gestures of women, and should also avoid seeing persons who are very rich. So it's a double-edged sword here. So Mahaprabhu is talking about both. Both are forms of lust. Lusting after money, lusting after possessions that you don't need. Of course, what we're saying here, the message of here, especially for grihastas, is not to give up one's household responsibilities. But two things: do not take on more than you need. Do not become attached to it. Learn to engage everything in the Lord's service according to Varna and Ashram. That is the highest understanding. That is actually true renunciation, is to offer what you have to Krishna. That's how you become free from Maya, because we're not saying that we should all move to the Himalayas and live in a cave. We have to have some material engagement, but it's what you do with that. If it's for yourself, it's a form of lust. If it's for Krishna, then it's a form of love. Simple. Okay, so then, of course, we need to kind of think of solutions here. But there's a lecture that Prabhupada gave in Calcutta on the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1-19. Prabhupada says, the modern civilization is based on Rajas, Tamo, Bhava. Nobody is satisfied. Everyone is greedy and lusty. So as long as you are lusty, so long you are greedy, there is no question of devotional service. There is no question of advancement to spiritual life. So therefore you have to come to the platform of Sattva Gun, where simply knowledge. There is no other thing, ignorance or greediness, only knowledge. In other words, you have knowledge. Knowledge is what is also a great tool for you. This kama and lobha is a heart disease. Actually, you don't require this, but it is a kind of disease. More and more and more and more, never satisfied, says Prabhupada. So we have to cure this disease. And this process, simple process, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was given. to cure the heart disease of lusty desires and greediness is chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. These are sastric injunction and spoken by personalities like Lord Chaitanya and other acharyas. So just to finish, I thought I've been talking a lot about the problem, haven't I? The power of lust, the power of Maya, and the allurements. But also we've touched on the solution as well. One of the best solutions, of course, the best solution is chanting of the holy name. And just to finish things off, really, who's the Acharya of the holy name? Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Great Acharya of the holy name. He was actually born in a Muslim family, but became the greatest example of the holy name, was constantly chanting. And of course, there was, I believe was it Ramananda Khan, a local leader, who became envious of Haridas Thakur and decided he was going to send a very beautiful prostitute to try and tempt Haridas Thakur in his hut and try and stop him from chanting, or to distract him, or to test him. And of course, the plan was, if he fell down with this girl, then the leader, he would have basically made a big thing of it, and again brought the holy name, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement into bad reputation and disrepute. But so even though all kinds of temptations all throughout the night and everything like that was presented to Haridas Thakur, he continued to take shelter of the holy name. And in the end, she realized, and he kept delaying, I'll spend some time with you, but now I've just got a few more rounds to chant. Just a few more, okay, a few more. And he kept doing that. It was a trick. He had no intention of entertaining her. So he just kept chanting and chanting and chanting. And in the end, in that process, she herself got purified, and she became a pure devotee from listening to Haridas Thakur's constant chanting. And that was his plan all along. So here's an example of the kind of strength that the holy name can give us. It's not that we should put ourselves in situations like that, but at least it gives you an example of the strength and the power of the holy name, particularly as constant chanting, attentive chanting, as can help us, if you like, from the illumines of the material world. But you do not put that to test, as it were. You look, as Prabhupada writes earlier in his purports, that you have to safeguard yourself as well. You avoid putting yourself in situations. You avoid what Kala Krishna Das did, which was to go away from the association of the Lord into the company of lusty women, and therefore you're putting yourself in a very difficult situation, because all of the material energy's full power will descend upon you and be like butter in front of the sun. It will melt. So, with those solutions and warnings all said, I hope that I've covered most of the relevant points. Does anyone have anything to add? Or any comments before we finish?
May I just stand for the women that is not comfortable to?
Yeah.
I don't think.
Hi.
Hello. Whereas I absolutely appreciate all of that. Standing for the women, especially women in the corner. How did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu think that was going to come over to his loyal female devotees? Is it not that men have an impulse control issue? Women, for just existing, is not Maya. Are we not the body? We are not the body. And this... It takes away... I am practicing Krishna consciousness, following 4 regulative principle, living in a grihastra household, and if we could just take a moment to think about the women in this corner, the women, the devotee women here who are listening to this and not causing revolt. I'm quite moved as you can probably tell. I don't know whether I'd want to tell my daughter that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so just let me respond if I may. So I try to make a differentiation between devotee women and non-devotee women.
No, I don't think I don't think that was made. And I'm not here to argue, because this is not an issue that's just come up today. I have had this issue before, and I refuse to stay quiet. I love Krishna, and I love Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I chant his names every day. I chant their names every day. I refuse to be the blame for men's impulse control.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You can refuse. What I would say is that when it comes to certain impulse control, men are very weak, weaker than women in that sense. Men are very, very weak.
That's what should be written.
Yeah.
Why is that not what's written? I often worry about how the Caitanya-Caritāmṛta is going to be read by and listened to by our female devotees, that are then automatically going to feel guilty for reading this and going, oh, I'm the problem, I'm Maya in a shape of a woman when I'm a 13-year-old girl, or I'm a daughter of a... Obviously, what I'm saying here is not brand new. We've heard this before. I just think that I'm speaking for these women in this corner because I'm quite moved, and I would say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, if this doesn't seem, I don't want to take words out of your mouths, but that's a hard listen. I mean, I know that Prabhus here are taking the majority, but that's a hard listen.
It is a hard listen. Even when we read the original verse in purple.
The blame should be put where the blame should lie.
Yeah.
I'll take this away from me, please.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I think that basically the men should know how, when it comes to this element, men should know how weak they are in that sense. In other words, they should not put themselves into situations. And there is an etiquette, there is a culture of the interaction between men and women. Women should also know how weak men are when it comes to the physical aspect. Lust can come in different forms with different people. But the main point, I think you're right, and I did say at the end of the day, you can become grihasta, devotee grihasta is the perfect situation. I think that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's standards as being a sannyasi is, I think in the modern age, can be very, very difficult for us. But like even when I read the original verse in purport, you think, oh, wasn't Mahaprabhu a little bit mean? You know, but I guess as at that time in history, and therefore you're right. We've got the verses and we've got Prabhupada's purports, but we also need to dissect and talk in this way. I think that the main message, I think, from what I can see, is there is a difference between Grihamaidi life and Grihasta life, and women are mothers, therefore they should be respected by men. And this is something I think you're hinting that the verses like this should not be used as a catalyst or as a tool to disrespect women, for example. I think this is perhaps very important, and it's good that you've mentioned it. It should not be used as an excuse. What I think it's saying, it's just saying that the interaction, the frivolous, let's say, interaction between men and women should be avoided, and particularly with men, but also with different people, it takes different forms. We have to be aware of that. Like, let's say, for example, there's a married woman who wouldn't be happy if her husband was being frivolous with other women. I'm sure that would be the case. In other words, you don't test Maya, you see. I think that's the message. Yeah.
You don't need to go and be frivolous with other women. It's changing the onus of it's those naughty, lusty girls.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're just saying.
Oh no, it's probably a two-way process, isn't it? It's both. Yeah.
I think that I wouldn't have been doing myself justice if I'd not mentioned it. That I think that we can change the narrative. I'm not asking to change Prabhupada's purport. I think sometimes there just needs to be a tiny adage that says, however, this is highlighting that there seems to be, because there are lusty women that will go with other men. We're not even talking about how men are often victims of lusty women. We're not talking about that either. I just think that there needs to be an addition to Prabhupada's purpose, and our discussion, especially when the female devotees in this room are a minority and don't always feel as comfortable as myself to say, hold on a minute.
No, I think it's very, when you have people have like Sangha groups or even Bhagavatam classes or whatever, I think, yeah, you're right, it's healthy, I think, that we discuss Prabhupada's verses and purports, but then as a group we dissect it, whether it's in mixed company or whether it's, one single sex company, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I'll end here though, because unless anybody has anything else to say, or I think it's all been said. There's a lot being said. There's a lot to digest, but I think the message is fairly clear. Oh, there's somebody here.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Thank you for your class. And my question actually was on the bit of Adam and Eve, especially the comment. If you can help me understand, because in my understanding, the forbidden fruit, which represented, knowledge of good and evil. So, kind of like by taking it, the temptation will make them like as good as God, because they will know what is good and evil. Actually, also heard that only after taking the fruit they became aware of their nakedness. That it seems to me that loss only came after them taking the fruit. That initially there was like this envy of becoming God and the temptation of the snake, but loss only came after. But you.
Okay, that is obviously from another tradition, a biblical. Although there's a similar story in the Bhavishya Purana actually, but I didn't want to kind of feel it's necessary to get involved in the details of that particular story because it's from another tradition. But yeah, we'll have to discuss that separately, I think. But thanks for the question. Okay, Caitanya-Caritāmṛta ki jai. Haribo, the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis ki jai. Get into it too much because it's coming from another succession. It's coming from the Bible. So I mean. So no, I just mentioned it because the idea of Adam, it was like the serpent was able to ask Eve to take off the apple, whereas then it was Eve that got Adam to take it. It was Eve it's a good point, but I just felt that it wasn't. I didn't think it maybe because of what I responded to your question about biblical.